Good morning, everyone. I think we're going to make a start this morning. My name is Jason Fergus, and I have the pleasure this morning of being your host, and it gives me great privilege to also be the director of Active Essex. Welcome to the virtual launch of the new physical activity and sports strategy for Essex, Southend, and Thurrock, titled Fit for the Future, and the exciting new behaviour change campaign titled Find Your Active. This morning, I have the pleasure of kicking things off, my first football pun of the morning, but I'm delighted to be joined by a splendid back four of presenters. Mike Piper, Executive Director from Sport England, Dr. Owen Fenton, Medical Director for Mid and South Essex, Dan Doghe, NHS Alliance Director for Mid Essex, and Lucy Bush, Research Director for Britain Thinks. But before we get talking and sharing this exciting journey with you all this morning, I'd like to start and share with you a very short video. Thank you. Find Your Active is a new exciting behaviour change campaign where we're encouraging the residents of Essex to get more physically active.
Find Your Active is about finding the things that are right for you in a way that's easy and fits in with your daily life. It's about communities, it's about everybody, it's about people working together to support each other, to do what they can, what they feel able to do to improve physical activity for everybody in Essex.
Find Your Active launches an exciting week of activities for the residents of Essex to really get engaged within their community, to find out what's happening on their doorstep.
I think we've got a real opportunity here, encouraging people of all communities to get out and just be more active.
When we move, we're stronger. We're stronger as individuals because our health gets better, but we also connect into our communities and they become stronger.
Physical activity has always been critical to people achieving their life goals, having fitter, healthier, happier lives.
As people, we're not born to stand about and stay still, we're born to be active. This is about inclusion, and that's why this is something that's close to my heart.
There's only 901,000 people that are physically active across the county with a population of 1.6. So there's a real charge and an urgency to really encourage our Essex residents to become more physically active. And so we absolutely want to focus on the importance of children and young people and about how we inspire them to become more physically active so they become our active adults for the future here in Essex.
What I've been really pleased is to see the synergy between what's going to happen here in Essex and Sport England's own strategy, uniting the movement.
We're really excited with partners to be launching Fit for the Future, a new 10-year strategy that really pulls together all of our partners to say that collaboratively we can work together to create a much more active Essex.
This is just the beginning, and this hopefully will serve as a launch pad for 200 new activities this week, which we hope will be the foundation for people over the next 10 years to make physical activity part of their daily routine.
I really would encourage people to get out and about and try new things. This is the summer to do it. Go online, have a look at the Active Essex Activity Finder and find your active for this summer. This morning, that certainly inspired you. It certainly inspired us last Thursday when the sun was out and there was no rain. So that was really quite exciting. And again, I'm looking at my window this morning and I can still see the sun out as well. So as we were saying, absolutely, now is such a critical moment for physical activity and sport here in Essex, Southend and Thurrock. I'm absolutely delighted that our system partners across the areas have really pledged their support to achieve that vision, as you can see on the screen there this morning. It's absolutely clear to recognise that COVID-19 has absolutely raised the profile and the importance of physical activity to heights that I've never seen before. And so Fit for the Future absolutely builds on that positive spotlight to really ensure that actually physical activity can be and is an important part of rebuilding. Within our strategy, we identify some really important missions, and you can see on the screen here this morning. Active travel, absolutely critical. And also climate change is absolutely critical. And that's one of the highest priorities currently in Essex. And we absolutely believe that physical activity has a huge part to contribute to that. We also have a huge part to play in the economic growth of Essex, Southend and Thurrock, because we truly believe a more active workforce
can contribute to the productivity of Essex, Southend and Thurrock. Next slide, please. I really like this slide because if anyone says, can you describe on one page the new exciting Fit for the Future strategy? And in summary, you can see this slide here absolutely does that. You can see the colours around the inside identify the 5 key strategic priorities: strengthening communities, sport and physical activity sector, children and young people, active environments, and levelling up health and wellbeing. Absolutely critical. What's also important are the 6 foundations for success that you can see on the bottom, that are the bedrock for the future here, for the future. Tackling inequalities, system-wide change, place-based working, people development, supporting economic growth, and finally measuring impact and sharing learning. They're all important factors as we work together collaboratively across the county. What's also very exciting is the new behaviour change campaign, which you've heard a little bit about already, which absolutely celebrates the fact that physical activity is inclusive, fun, and for everyone. Next slide, please. We've done some extensive work, and you'll hear a little bit about that work later on from Lucy from Britain Thinks, but we've absolutely done a huge amount of work on our redesign of our website, so it makes it easy for anybody who wants to get started to think about being physically active. We have an activity finder, which identifies lots of local opportunities for people to be active. We've got our very own, I call it, on-demand box set with over 200 plus video sessions for people to try at home. And of course, we've got lots of ideas. So there's absolutely no excuse, we hope, for people not to know how they need to get started. Next slide, please. What's also critical is we support our partners. And we're very pleased to also announce that we now also have a Find Your Active Fund. And this fund very much focuses on awarding organisations and ambassadors the opportunity to take that immediate action to really engage people who are less active as part of the pandemic. And so this launched last Thursday as well. And I'm really pleased to say that the relationship managers and the Active Essex team are a really important part of this journey. If you need any help and support, please go to our website and also talk to our Active Essex relationship managers. We'll be only happy to help. I'm going to pause there because I said I've got a splendid back four that I really want to bring into this webinar this morning for you. And so the first of those people who couldn't be here this morning, unfortunately, is Mike Diper, Executive Director of Sport England. But he very kindly, to show his absolute commitment and passion to our journey here in Essex, has produced a very short message. And now I'm going to ask my colleague to play this very short message to you. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Mike Diper from Sport England. I'm really sorry I can't be with you this morning, but I really wanted to take a moment to say how much Sport England supports the new Essex, Thurrock and Southend strategy, Fit for the Future. We're absolutely behind it and supporting it. This is such a moment in time. It's never been more important to help people get active in a way which works for them than now as we come out of COVID. And I love that this strategy is for everyone. It's about making an active Essex, Southend and Thurrock for everybody. And I also love the bold, innovative and ambitious campaign, Find Your Active. And what I love about that is it's about finding what works for you. That might be going out into the garden and doing some work there, or going for a walk with some friends, or a social cycle, or visiting the park, or going to your leisure centre. It doesn't matter how you get active. The thing that matters is that you do get active, and really small changes in behaviour lead to massive benefits for our health, our well-being, our mental resilience, and our communities. I'm also really delighted that there is so much synergy between what's going to happen in Essex, Southend and Thurrock through Fit for the Future and our own Uniting the Movement strategy. They're both looking over what's going to happen in the next 10 years, and it will perhaps take 10 years to get everyone active. They're definitely both focusing tackling inequalities, Everybody needs some help, but some people need more. And we need to help everyone be active. They're all about both strategies, combining efforts. So in conclusion, I wish you every success. Thank you so much for getting behind Fit for the Future and the new campaign, Find Your Active. They're both going to make such a difference across Essex, Southend and Thurrock.
Thanks, Mike. And as you can hear, really heartening to hear the strong synergy that we here in Essex, South and Thurrock have created with a national strategy. And as Mike said, it's not going to happen overnight. It's a 10-year vision, and we're absolutely committed to work with all of you here to really make a difference here for the residents of Essex. I'd like to introduce our next speaker. And as you saw from my summary on a page slide, that levelling up health and wellbeing is absolutely one of the key strategic priorities for us. I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Rowan Fenton, Medical Director for Mid and South Essex, who is a key local system partner, but also someone who's extremely passionate in several conversations I've had with him about this important agenda. So good morning to you, Dr. Fenton. Thank you for joining us.
Morning, Jason, and thank you for inviting me, and thanks to Mike for his words. Really important, and it's great to see such national focus on what's happening in our part of the world, Southend, Thurrock and Essex. I'm Ronan Fenton. I'm a consultant anaesthetist at Broomfield Hospital and have been there since 1999. But I'm also the medical director of what we call the Healthcare Partnership, which is the area of Mid and South Essex involving Southend, Thurrock and Essex. And the aim of it is to bring everybody involved in health and care together so that for all of us, because we're all part of the 1.2 million population in this area, for all of us that we live a better and healthier life, not needing health and care services, but when we do need them, that they're there to the best of our ability to provide them. That's what I'm trying to do with many, many other colleagues. And of course, this program couldn't come at a better time to underscore this. This is all about making and helping us all to live happier, healthier lives without needing health and care interventions. And if I just move away from that to my own clinical world, I've been involved in preparing patients for surgery for 22 years now in this area. And way back, probably 2002, 2003, I remember watching how people who were unfit physically did less well after major surgery. And I was lucky back then. I was backed by a number of people. Dan Doherty is one. He'll speak to you shortly. And we actually started in this region trying to see people before operations, figure out how good they were from a fitness perspective, and then say to them, look, you know what, you can get involved, not just waiting for your operation, but preparing for your operation and actually getting yourself fitter from it. And I was quite moved, actually. I still remember the first patient we did back in 2002. I could name him, but I won't. And I can remember the difference, actually. We took him for 10 weeks and we said, we'll help you. And it wasn't marathon stuff we were doing. We said, we'll help you get more active. And a couple of things happened. Well, of course, the first thing that happened was he was fitter for his surgery, which was major surgery, and he did better because of it. But what really struck me, and I remember the day he came back to me and he said, you know what, Doc, I didn't really believe I could do this. I really didn't believe it. And I can. And he said, I never believed I could exercise. And do you know what? We have medicalized most of the world. Everybody over 50, 55 is on a couple of tablets or other. And we believe that if we move too fast, we will cause ourselves damage. And of course, that is far from the truth. And we now need to open our eyes to the fact that a little bit of activity, in fact, quite a lot of activity, 30 minutes a day, 5 times a week, ideally, is really good for you. And that's exactly what this program does. That's the power of it. Everybody can do their bit of activity. They're in competition with nobody but themselves to be a little more active today than yesterday. And it will make a difference. Mike Gogarty, Director of Public Health for Essex, one of the things he says is actually the most powerful thing we could do to improve health and care in this area would be to encourage physical activity. And he's absolutely right. So we've been at this for many years, but we've just been through COVID. And of course, during that time, actually, if you look at some of the national stats, overall in the country, the exercise level stays the same, but it has gone down in the very elderly and down in the very young. And the mid-range has upped theirs. They've gone out and about. When I talk to GPs, as I do a lot, when I talk to clinicians in hospitals, as I do a lot, what they're saying to me is, you know what, Ronan? We're seeing patients coming out of houses that haven't moved for a year. They're physically less able and they're emotionally scarred by that. That's what our GPs are saying. When I speak to our clinical colleagues in hospitals trying to do what I was trying to do for 20 years, get people ready for surgery, they're saying, oh my God, the people who in the past would have been ready to roll are no longer so. And they call it the box set generation. They say people took their box sets. They were great initially. We all did our 20 minutes a day that we were allowed, but then people became deconditioned. And that's just what happens. So we have a problem on our hands right now in terms of what we need to do for people having major operations, but also we've got an opportunity to use that and to use what we've known for a long time, which is let's get people moving. It's good for them, not only for their operations, but for their life in general. And that's what's ahead of us. And that's the prize we have now. And that's what Jason and colleagues have done with Active Essex, and in particular, the Find Your Active bit, because the key is, as Mike just said, to do a little bit. Small change matters. I tweeted last night myself going up and down the stairs in the halftime interview when England were 1, Denmark were 1, and I just needed to work off a bit of stress up and down the stairs in my own home. We can all do that even during Coronation Street. And we should encourage people to do it because it will make a difference. And I think because I did it, England obviously won. That was my contribution to last night's fantastic victory. But now is the time. Now is the time for us all, and there are over 100 people listening to this now. Go out and think what you can do to be a little more active today than you were yesterday. That's all you need to do, and do it, build it up. Aim for 30 minutes 5 times a week. That's a big aim. I try and do it myself, and sometimes I get there, sometimes I don't. But do a little more, and you'll feel better, you'll live longer, and your health and care system will last longer, which is fantastic. And tell people about it. Encourage them. Tell them that they can do it. If it's walking to the shops instead of driving, if it's parking on top of a multi-story and walking down the stairs and up again instead of parking at the bottom floor, using the stairs instead of the elevator at work, all these things will mount up to make you feel better and you live longer and better. And that's what it's about. Now is the time, and we should all get behind this. This is the method, and I really think that Active Essex have stumbled, well, they haven't stumbled, they've very thoughtfully come upon a really important way of doing this, because we have, I think, made people think that unless you're running a marathon, you're doing nothing. It's not the case. A little bit makes a lot of difference, and build it up. So I think the method is what we have, and now is the time, and we should seize the day and move forward with it. I'm really positive about this. I think in my lifetime, this could be the thing that makes the biggest difference to health and care in Essex. And congratulations to everybody involved. I'm going to hand you over to my colleague, Dan Doherty now. Dan is a good colleague of mine. He's a clinical colleague. He's a physiotherapist. But as well as being a physiotherapist, Dan has been influential in many leadership roles in our system at clinical commissioning level and across our system. And now he's what's called an alliance director in the health and care partnership that we have. But as well as his leadership role, Dan is a champion of what will result in improved lives for our population. It was Dan, by the way, who helped me turn the key 20 years ago, roughly, or at a time when nobody else was doing this, to actually start considering getting people to exercise before their operations and involved in their own preparation. And now that's happening all over the country. Dan, although he doesn't realize it, has saved more lives than most people. So I'm going to hand you straight over to Dan, who will tell you what's happening to help people find their own active in our community. Dan.
Thanks, Ronan. Yeah, thanks everyone. So Dan Doherty, I'm the Alliance Director for Mid Essex, and as of yesterday, I've been appointed as the Deputy Accountable Officer for the CCGs in this area as well. But first and foremost, I'm a physiotherapist. I have been for over 20 years, and as a physio, my career essentially has been based around the concept of using physical activity, exercise, and movement to treat pain and discomfort in people. And I was thinking about what I'd say to you guys earlier today, and I was thinking back to a physio mentor of mine, a lady called Diane Lee from Canada. She always used to say to me about her patients, Dan, you know, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. So you'll always get these outputs. The thing is, people haven't been able to do what they always done. People haven't been able to go out and walk the dogs the way that they would. People have been scared. Kids haven't been able to exercise. Sport has stopped. My rugby and cricket was cancelled for 15 months. People were frightened to go out walking. You've probably all done the pavement dance over the last 18 months or so, where you come across someone and you're actually physically worried about walking past them so they cross the road. Those sorts of things. And COVID wasn't equal. It didn't hit us all equally. Kids were more profoundly affected. Their education, their physical activity that they took part in at school was significant. But COVID also influenced the population in different ways. It was the elderly that were most fearful about going out. It was many of the elderly that were told to shield, and they took shielding literally. We know that COVID also impacted on particular ethnic groups more profoundly. We actually know COVID had a higher mortality in people from a BAME background, a Black African minority ethnic background. So those people shielded, they actively avoided going out, so they weren't able to do what they always did. So even if they were active historically, their activity reduced. Not only that, obviously we need people to become more active. So COVID has introduced and magnified inequalities in physical activity that already existed in our system. I think it was great for people who could afford the Peloton bikes and to sign up to these great online things and convert gyms in the houses, but that wasn't the majority of people. So we've got to try and do something. Now, Ronan said about the impact of COVID in the NHS, and you guys, I don't need to tell you on the call, you'll have read it in the press. Our waiting lists are longer than they've ever been. Our GPs are seeing the impact of people who have been inactive. I can tell you it as a physio. An elderly person who historically would have been out walking the dog, who historically would have gone up to the local shops, maintaining physical activity, who hasn't done that for 18 months, that will have a profound impact on their mental health, on their confidence, on their anxiety levels, but also on more objective metrics like their muscle strength, their balance, their confidence in walking. It will increase their falls risk, make them more at risk of falling. And our GPs are telling us that they're seeing the impact of this profoundly. They're seeing the impact on this of those people with long-term conditions like COPD, asthma, diabetes. They're seeing the impact on this on all walks of all ages of life in terms of the anxiety of returning to physical activity. So in a moment, you're going to hear from Lucy Bush, and Lucy will tell you a little bit about kind of the behavioural insights of how you can get people to exercise. And it's really important that Find Your Active uses the term active. It doesn't use exercise. It says find your activity, not get fit, not go and run, not go and exercise, but find your active. Doesn't matter if that's weeding, walking the dog, walking up the stairs during half time. It really doesn't matter what it is. It can have a major impact. But one of the things that Ronan and I know, and people in health know, is that there's a real hook when people come into the health system. They're actually amenable to behavioural change. You used to term it making every contact count. But we know that if somebody goes to see an anaesthetist like Ronan and they're going to have some quite profound surgery, they're more likely to take the advice of that anaesthetist in terms of increasing physical activity. So one of the things that we're doing as the NHS is partnering with Active Essex and partnering with the Lifestyle Service in Essex to offer people who are on NHS waiting lists the opportunity to take part in exercise. Now, in some cases, this would be quite specific exercise. So people who are waiting for hip or knee replacements, it may be a type of exercise to strengthen their legs, their quadriceps, their gluteal muscles. What this does is it gives them a better outcome of surgery. They go into the surgery stronger and they're more likely to recover more quickly and get a better outcome. But we've also got people who are waiting for more profound surgery. Could be complex bowel surgery, for example. And sometimes in these cases, if these people just get a tiny bit fitter, it can have a huge influence, a huge influence on the outcome of their surgery. So one of the things that we're doing is partnering with Active Essex to offer all of those people who are currently waiting for any form of surgery like that the opportunity to take part in a tailored physical activity programme. And the hope is obviously, and I won't steal Lucy's thunder in terms of behavioural change, but the hope is obviously that that captures those people and encourages them into physical activity in the long term. And then the final thing for me is to say that we're going to work with our GPs in a similar way. And GPs are saying to us all the time, we are seeing people who are deconditioned. It's not the greatest term, but you understand what it means. We are seeing people who previously were fit and well, who are managing their diabetes, who are managing their weight, who are managing their asthma, but actually now they're not. And the reason they're not is because they've been locked up for the last 16 months. And as I say, there's an inequality in that because it's impacted on the elderly, on those from ethnic groups, on children more profoundly perhaps than just the general population. So likewise, GPs are identifying patients and saying there are opportunities for you to go into supported activity. But the key for us is changing the dialogue a little bit. This isn't just an exercise referral scheme, which is what we've always done. And remember, if we always do what we've always done, we always get what we've always got. We're now thinking about it differently in the NHS and saying we need people to find their active, what works for them. And that's where the social science, in terms of how you can capture the imagination of people to get active in innovative ways, is really, really important. I'm ever so proud that I've recently become a board member of Active Essex and sort of as a system partner in the health service. It's fantastic to be part of a behavioural change campaign here. And it's fantastic to see an organisation that is using research and insights in terms of developing that campaign. So for me, it's great to be able to introduce Lucy Bush now, who comes from Britain Thinks. And Lucy's been leading some of the research around Find Your Active. Lucy's a research director, but she has a background in social anthropology. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what she has to say. So over to you, Lucy.
Thanks so much, Daniel. And if you'll just bear with me for one moment, I'm just going to share my screen. I've got some slides as part of my presentation. So first thing to say, I'll just introduce Britain Thinks. I'm not sure whether everyone on the call has heard of Britain Thinks. So we are an insight and strategy consultancy, and we take it as our mission to put the people who matter most to your organisation at the heart of your thinking. And so we work with clients across different sectors to do exactly that. And I lead on a lot of our place-based research at Britain Thinks, which means that I work with lots of local authorities and have worked with Essex County Council for several years now on a range of different topics. I absolutely love working with Essex County Council and have been absolutely delighted to work with them on this piece of work. Fascinating to see how the research findings have been turned into real kind of action, and yeah, very happy to be talking to you today about sort of what we do in terms of the research that in part helped to inform the campaign. So we were commissioned by the council to go out and talk with inactive residents across the county, focusing on those people living in deprived areas, so Basildon, Colchester and Tendring. And the specific objectives that we had were to understand the barriers to doing more physical activity, but also to kind of, dig down below that, what underlies those barriers. We used a behavioural change model called the COM-B model that I don't have time to talk through in lots of detail today, but there are three kind of key elements of it that I will be referring to through this presentation. And it basically sort of breaks down behaviour into capability, are you able to do a behaviour? Opportunity, do you have the chance, the opportunity to do a certain behaviour? And motivation, do you kind of see the benefits and do you feel sufficiently motivated to do a behaviour? So part of our job was to understand the relationship between those three types of sort of behaviour change and how they influence one another. And then we weren't just looking at the barriers, we were also looking at the drivers to behaviour change and wanted to explore what would be needed to affect behaviour change amongst people who are currently less active. So just a quick overview of kind of what we did, we started off the project with a 2-week digital ethnography. And by that, we mean we onboarded 30 participants to an online platform, a closed online platform, and we used that space to get to know our participants and to ask them sort of questions about their lives. We kind of understand, we sort of had a little diary task. We got them to upload photos. It was all about sort of understanding, the ebbs and flows of their kind of daily life, not going in and asking them a barrage of questions about their activity or inactivity, but sort of understanding how that would fit into their lives. And we also sort of explored some barriers to increasing activity levels in that 2-week ethnography. Following on from that, we did some interviews. So we interviewed every single person that had taken part in that ethnography and got to know them a little bit better, and sort of, it dug under some of the things that they'd been telling us in that online community to explore kind of the barriers that they'd told us about. We then had a kind of workshop with the client where we kind of said, this is everything we've heard. This is, what we think the main barriers are. And talk through the findings from the first 2 phases. And that then went into a final phase 3, where we brought people together into workshops. So the same participants, we split them into groups. And this was much more forward facing and sort of solutions focused. And we were thinking, we took the barriers in turn and said, what could help overcome this particular barrier, and kind of pushing them to think what might support them to become more active. So that was our methodology, an overview of what we did. I don't have, haven't included in this presentation kind of a breakdown of the sample, but we had sort of a good mix of different demographics and so on. And the point was that everybody had a level of inactivity. So just to sort of explain that. In terms of sort of background views on activity, some really interesting findings kind of came up here. And the first one to say is that doing more physical activity was really top of mind for inactive residents until prompted. So it can be quite difficult to sort of when you're working in this policy area, you're really passionate about it, where as Dr. Venter was saying, all of those amazing benefits that come from doing physical activity, you sort of expect that people are out there sort of wishing they were doing it, but not quite sort of able to or thinking about it. But the fact is that it's for a lot of people it's not really on their radar. They're going about their daily lives, they're quite happy in their routines. It's not something that they're necessarily thinking about. When we prompted them to think about physical activity and what they may not be doing or be doing in their lives, very often that evoked, I should say, feelings of guilt, powerlessness, and apathy. It really kind of did. People kind of reflected on it, and they sort of, they felt bad. It felt demotivating, that sort of feeling. This is something I should be doing, and they sort of said, "Oh, yes, I know I should be, but I don't know. I don't like the idea, or I don't quite know how to do that." And that sort of leads on to the third point, that the talk of exercise, and that word in particular has quite a lot of negative connotations for people. Surfaces, quite deeply held kind of emotional responses. We had people talking about bad experiences in their PE classes 20 or 30 years ago that still stick with them, and sort of I don't feel like a sporty person, that's not me. Really kind of really a strong emotional responses. Which means, just moving on to point 4 there, that getting started, just making those first steps can feel extremely daunting. And we also found that residents often felt that they sort of put active people on a bit of a pedestal. They had this idea that being an active person meant you were kind of, I think as other panelists were saying, running a marathon or doing something, really kind of extreme. And they sort of it was a very othering kind of sense that they had. And then just a final point, just in terms of the sort of the pandemic, it really did feel like the successive lockdowns had made it feel much harder to get started, be that in terms of struggling with mental health and anxiety being outside and so on. Also just to having lost kind of the routine or kind of the active parts of your kind of daily life, walking to work or whatever it might have been, that would have provided those opportunities for activity. So some really kind of interesting kind of background views that we unearthed in the research. And then just sort of moving on a little bit to think about the barriers and overcoming those. So when we asked our participants, what are the reasons why, the things that stop you from sort of being active, the reasons were very much around lack of opportunity and lack of capability. So you can see in this kind of on this chart here, things like not having time to do more activity, not feeling fit enough to do activity, it'd be too expensive to do physical activity. Those are all opportunity and capability barriers. But the methodology that we took, that sort of, when we had the deep dive interviews and we kind of spoke to people and we were kind of able to dig under the surface of the things they were telling us, it was motivation that often emerged as an underlying factor, and that sort of interlinked with capability and opportunity. If you basically, the opportunity and capability barriers feel much bigger when you don't have the motivation to overcome them. And as part of our analysis, we kind of created a set of typologies based around this opportunity, motivation, and capability barriers that helped us to sort of understand what's the main reason for this particular person that's meaning that they're struggling to do physical activity. And these are sort of the four things I'm just going to talk through in the remaining part of the presentation, which we sort of found were the key kind of driver that would help them overcome the kind of the relevant barrier. So when it comes to motivation, one of the most crucial things was making sure that that inactive people could see people like me in the communications. I've talked about this kind of othering sense that people had about inactive people are sort of, a species apart. Really important, people like me are represented, emphasizing the social benefits rather than the health benefits. Under capability, modeling and facilitating non-exercise forms of physical activity. And then opportunity is about focusing on making it easy to get started. So I'm just going to quickly go through each of those. And then I think we're going to go to Q&A. So the first thing is about making sure inactive people feel people like me are represented in communications. Yeah, absolutely crucial. We had quite a few people sort of saying that they felt self-conscious when they, if they went out for even just walking actually, but, the idea of going out for like a run in the local park, really sort of worried people, and they wanted to sort of be able to see people like them in communications, in kind of on websites and so on, or on posters, to make them feel like this was talking to them, it gave them confidence, rather than sort of seeing somebody kind of lycra clad, which they sort of felt was kind of was demotivating. So really crucial. Secondly, it was in terms of overcoming the motivation barriers, is about emphasizing the social benefits, and interestingly, not going on about the health benefits. So our participants kind of said to us, yes, we know what the health benefits are. That's not the reason I'm not doing it. But they hadn't always necessarily considered the social benefits to doing activity with friends, with family, with children, going for a walk with an older neighbour, for example, and the idea that it could be fun and sociable. In their mind, physical activity was painful and horrible, and actually talking about it being fun and sociable was a really strong motivation driver. I think there's been some reference to this idea of kind of using the word exercise, and it did have, it was quite a powerful word for inactive participants who didn't feel like this was for them. And they often didn't actually recognize or think about the sort of other types of physical activity that they could take part in, that they could enjoy. It was absolutely crucial in the things that we tested, that the non-exercise forms of physical activity were the things that kind of caught their eye and thought, oh yeah, actually I'm doing a little bit of that, boosted confidence, this sort of thing. I do gardening, maybe I could, do X and Y and kind of build on that. That was a motivating thing. And then finally, on the opportunity side, sort of this idea about focusing in on getting started. So making those first steps were really, the most difficult, the difficult point, of the journey. And it's why kind of Find Your Active tested so well in the groups that we did. This idea about it being personalized, tailored to you, was so powerful, and really sort of help people kind of connect with that idea and think, there's something for me in here. It's not big and scary. There's personalized online activity finder. Sounds inspiring and exciting, and people sort of got quite excited by that particular element of it. So that's a sort of a whistle-stop tour of the findings from our piece of research for Essex County Council, and really Active Essex as well, and really interesting to sort of see how that's informed the campaign, and very interested to kind of hear your comments and questions.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Really, really appreciate your time, and a big thank you to Dan and Dr. Fenton and to Jason for opening the webinar this morning as well. I've got the next section to take you through a Q&A, so I'm just going to ask our speakers to pop back on their cameras so we can see them all, and then I've got some questions lined up for the panel. So Jason, I'm going to come to you first of all. And the first question is around the vision for the new strategy. And it talks about 10 years, but as we know, a lot can happen over those 10 years, and we've seen that certainly in the last 18 months with COVID. How do you expect, or how do you see the 10-year vision continuing to be relevant within that time frame?
Very much, Kelly. And I think, to be fair, Dr. Fenton and Dan absolutely described just how important physical health and physical activity is. It's not going to disappear overnight, Kelly. I think what we've seen is COVID-19, and one of the two things you could do back in March from the Prime Minister and the Chief Medical Officer was to exercise and to go and get your shopping. And the exercise piece was highlighted because of the wider benefits that brings. The work that Dan described earlier on, Kelly, about the waiting list and encouraging people to support being physically active in advance of any operations. Dr. Fenton mentioned the importance of recovery. Actually, if you're more active, that's going to aid your recovery after operations and illness. I don't think that's going to disappear overnight, Kelly. So I think that this absolutely is, hence the 10-year approach, that this is something that habit's going to take a long time. And Lucy touched a little bit on that around the behaviour change. It doesn't happen overnight. And so that's why both Mike Diaper, Dan and Lucy and everyone is saying that actually it is the long ball game, using a football analogy this morning. And actually we're in this for the long haul with our partners to really embed, and one of my favourite words for those that know me is we want to hardwire this into the system, into the fabric of Essex, Southend and Thurrock. So actually it's there for the longevity for years to come. And also, Kelly, that's why children and young people absolutely are one of our strategic priorities, because if we absolutely get that fabric right with young people, they are the future adults for Essex, Southend and Thurrock. So absolutely, it's important. That's why, Kelly, it's a long ball game, definitely.
Lovely, thank you, Jason. That's great. And just a reminder, if anyone on the call's got any questions that they want to ask the panel, please just use the Q&A function at the bottom of Zoom to ask any questions, and we'll try and come to them. If we don't get through them all, we will pick up those from the panel, and then we'll send the answers back out when we send the recording of this launch to you as well. Dan, I'm going to come to you for the next question. And the next question has been asked is, what can the sector do to better meet the needs of those who have deconditioned, potentially as a result of shielding over the last 16 to 18 months, or just not engaged before?
Yeah, so thanks, Kelly. And I think the answer on that is very much related to everything that we just heard from Lucy. It's about changing the dialogue that we have with patients. And, you know, I listened to what Lucy said there and similar talks previously, and reflect on some of the terminology that I've used as a clinician with patients historically. And I have always talked about sport and exercise and the benefits of exercise. And I think there's a few clinicians on the call as well. And I actually think there's a lot of work that Ronan and I can lead with our clinical colleagues to improve their understanding of the barriers to activity and physical activity with our patients, so that we need to start talking to people about finding they're active and about doing the things that are right for them, about the fact that an hour in the garden is as good as going for a run, the fact that regularly walking the dog is as good as doing Joe Wicks, the fact that doing hula hooping or dancing, or one of my patients, believe it or not, recently had installed a pole to learn to do pole dancing. Amazing. Not sports, not traditionally thought of, and not the type of conversations that clinically people tend to have. Physios, we prescribe exercise. I'd argue maybe we should be prescribing activity, not exercise. See, how dull is it for me to say to somebody, do 50 quadriceps dips to do this? Far more useful if I could say, what is it that works for you? What is it that works for you, Kelly? Oh, you enjoy being in the garden. Well, actually, when you're in the garden now, think about when you're doing this and doing it this way. And that'll have the same impact on your muscles, your ligaments, your joints, as perhaps the prescribed exercise that I may also give. And Kelly, if it's all right with you, there were a few questions in the chat, and I'm just going to say, so Donna from Carers First asked about how does pain fit into the barrier area. It's really important, Donna, and chronic pain was an area that I specialised in. And again, that would tie back to me as a clinician to thinking about what are the types of activity that we can prescribe and what help can we give people. Because with patients with chronic pain, as probably Donna knows, it's about pacing activity. It's about finding the right activity that you can take in small amounts of time, not necessarily setting a goal that says, I'm going to do an hour. Actually, if you do 2 or 3 minutes, that's good enough initially. And if you do 2 or 3 minutes and then you do another 2 or 3 minutes a couple of hours later, that's good enough. And it doesn't have to be prescribed exercise. It can be just an activity that you enjoy. And often what we know with the mechanisms behind chronic pain is actually if you enjoy the activity, your brain goes into a slightly different state and you tend to engage with it in a different way. And the other one that I'll pick up on there is Rob Mann asks about a directory for local GPs. There will be, Rob, and there's a way for people to be signposted on the Active Essex website to look at the activities near them. So I'm going to hopefully find somebody to type that in the chat, or I'll try and do it myself in a moment. But hopefully that answers that, and a couple that popped up in the chat, Kelly.
Thank you, Dan, and thanks for answering the chronic pain question, because that was going to be my next one that I was going to come to either yourself or Roland for, so thank you for that. And yeah, just to pick up on the activity finder, so we've launched a new activity finder alongside the strategy and the campaign, and all of the details of the activity finder can be found on our website, and also information on how you can upload your activities onto that activity finder as well as a provider or a deliverer of sport or physical activity.
Kelly, can I just jump in? Sorry, but there's a few questions for people saying, how do we raise the awareness of that? And it's worth saying that when I was referring to working with GPs, we're also partnering with an organisation called the Essex Lifestyle Service, and what this is a mechanism for GPs to be able to essentially, when they identify a patient that would benefit from this sort of thing, to be able to notify the lifestyle service of this individual, and then the lifestyle service will contact that patient on the GP's behalf, and it will be the lifestyle service. This is Lindsay Abbott's questions that have come up. It'll be the lifestyle service that do that kind of activity matching, so it won't necessarily be Lindsay down to the individual. Clearly they will still need to obviously want to take part, but they'll be signposted to that, and the hope is that they can do it in a way that promotes the type of conversations that Lucy referred to, rather than it be a more prescriptive thing. And in terms of raising awareness of that process with GPs, that's something that Ronan and I are actively working on.
Lovely. And we've also done some work in Mid and South, Dan, to embed the activity finder onto PCM websites as well, which is great. So yeah, we're moving in the right direction.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Jason, I'm going to come back to you because there's a question that's just come in the Q&A around, is the Find Your Active Fit for the Future strategy considering offering support to schools to help them increase or restart their free after school clubs provisions? Just be good to get an understanding of some of the work that's going on with children, young people and schools.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. And absolutely. Children and young people, as you saw earlier on, are an important strategic priority for Fit for the Future. As I mentioned earlier, we have to absolutely engage our young people, and just imagine how much they've missed over the last 14 months or so. Lee Monk, our relationship manager, has the thematic lead and the exciting opportunity of leading our children and young people work. And there's a whole array of interventions that Lee's leading on. At the moment, we're currently working on a program called Open School Facilities. We're actually connecting to schools to encourage them to reopen their facilities to communities. So as that question just said, we can see the upsurge back again of after school clubs and community clubs back into school facilities, so our young people can absolutely kind of take part. We've also looked at a whole array of different programs, including things like the Daily Mile and also the Primary School Sports Premium. Let's not forget that actually schools have got resource from central government, and we're absolutely trying to reinvigorate them to think again about how they kind of open that door again and get those young people back. So it's an absolutely a priority because we know how much they've missed, and certainly we're working with our array of partners across the education settings to really make that impact again, Kelly. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you. And I'm just going to finish with a final question with Lucy. As a sector, we've changed our language to help better talk to more people and break down some of those barriers. But how can we continue to reframe people's negative narrative of physical activity?
Just coming off mute there. Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, you know, one of the things that really struck me from doing this bit of research is how important language is, you know, and how important a framing of something or just talking about something in a particular way conjures up so many kind of negative associations and feelings, you know, with people that we're trying to kind of connect to and encourage. And I think it's about listening to those people and understanding the language that they use and the things that they find motivating and inspiring, and using that language to talk to them. I think it's you know, as complex and as simple as that in many ways. Yeah, very much kind of listening exercise and understanding, not making any assumptions about sort of how to talk to somebody about something, but you know, really kind of engaging with them and working with them to rewrite that narrative.
Thank you, Lucy. And thank you again to Dan, to Dr. Fenton and to yourself, Lucy. I'm going to hand back over to Jason.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. It just leaves me to say, what an exciting time that we have here in Essex, Southend and Thurrock. We have a great opportunity and we have some great partners, and I'm really enthused about what the opportunity in the future is ahead. I think I can't stop without saying that actually I need your help, and your help is absolutely kind of critical. And so for me, last slide, please, Mel, there is a call to action. There's a call to action that absolutely means that how can you help us spread the important word of Find Your Active? And I suppose we absolutely recognise you all here on the call here today as system supporters, system ambassadors. You've seen my backdrop today and my virtual backdrop. Dan's got one, Kelly's got one. We've got those available. And they're absolutely so important to start a conversation. But actually we want you to find your passion, be really clear about what makes you excited about being active, and share your story and share that with others. And you heard Dr. Fenton talking about running up and down the stairs during half time to make sure that England could win. You know, those are the important little nuggets that we really need you to do as system ambassadors. We want to keep you informed. And I know that our comms team are absolutely going to be on the button and making sure that you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn, and really engage the campaign, and also upload your own content as well, which I think is absolutely key. Find your style. So your style could be about yourself and your own story, or it could be about how you champion others within your organisation, within your family and friends communities, but really championing the importance of this positive, exciting movement to Find Your Active. Of course, we want you to connect, and we're doing that today. And Kelly and the team will be back in touch on how we can continue to connect with you through webinars to keep you up to date with some really exciting speakers and really engage you on this process. But also think about how you can include things within your own workplace. Actually, you know, Kelly's been doing sessions with a variety of partners where actually she drops in virtually and does 15-minute sessions. If you think that's something that might be useful to infuse your workforce, then absolutely let us know, but we're really keen to connect. And finally, like my speakers have done so eloquently this morning, use your voice. Use your voice and absolutely champion this exciting opportunity
that we have to really make Essex a more active place. So thank you again. Thank you everyone for your time this morning. We look forward to this very exciting future ahead. Thanks very much.